Hey, this is Corey. Hey, do you feel stuck? Are you lacking confidence or maybe even lacking consistency? I'm excited to tell you about a new program that I am rolling out. It covers the four main areas of your life: you, marriage, parenting, and work. The reason I developed this program is because so often in my one-on-one coaching, I find myself repeating the same stuff over and over. And so what I wanted to do is put together a group program that includes video, group calls, some community, so it gives more access to more people who are stuck, whether they're stuck in their personal life or their professional life. And so I'm excited to launch this out. It comes out on June 7th. You can sign up now. Go to CoreyMCarlson.com/leadership. And from there, you'll get all the details on the program, what's included, what you'll get out of it, all the benefits and features. So go to CoreyMCarlson.com/leadership to learn more about this program called The Confident and Consistent Leader. Now on to today's episode.
Welcome to the Win at Home First podcast. I'm your host, Corey Carlson. This podcast is where we talk about how successful business leaders win, not only at work, but also at home. On this podcast, we'll go behind the scenes with great leaders to hear stories of how they win. Thank you for listening, and on to today's episode.
Hello, this is Corey. Today's episode, Scott Oyler, is a good one because selfishly, I asked a lot of questions that I wrestle with that I knew a realtor would wrestle with as well. Scarcity mindset, competition, ambition, all these things that I talk to clients a lot about every day. I took them directly to Scott, who has been an entrepreneur to growing a real estate company. But we have a great conversation as well when I asked him about a time in his life where he had to hand over his story for a greater story. So it's a great episode. Hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Thank you. Hello, this is Corey Carlson. You're listening to Win at Home First podcast. Today, I'm joined with Scott Oyler, who is a realtor here in Cincinnati. And there's a lot of realtors in the city, no doubt about it, but not many have grown it to double-digit teams. And so we're going to learn from him on that. But he's also done it while winning at home. He has 2 kids and married, plus very strong in his faith and in the faith community here in Cincinnati. So a lot to learn today. I'm excited. So Scott, thank you very much for being here.
Corey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So first question is, what is that key trait to help leaders win at work and win at home?
I think for me, it is being super receptive to feedback, especially if you want to grow. And it's one of the things that I've learned in my business. It's hard to hear the criticism sometimes, constructive criticism. Sometimes you think you have it all figured out, but in reality, when you talk to some outside folks, you realize, hey, there's some things we need to tweak, some things we need to work, and there's always room to grow. And that goes for home as well. I mean, when I have to be receptive to feedback with my wife, if we have to have a strong foundation in order for our family to have a great foundation. And so that takes getting some feedback, which isn't always easy to hear, but for me, that's been a key trait, I feel like, to win both at work and at home.
Oh, I love that. So I want to dive into that a little bit just to help all of us get feedback. How do you get feedback from your employees?
Yeah, so I when I actually set up my reviews with our folks, the first question I ask is, hey, what can I do better? What can I do better to support you? What are some things that you feel like I can improve on, and get that feedback? And like I said, sometimes it can be painful to hear, and you want to argue sometimes, but then you're realizing okay, you got to be receptive to it, and change. And I also feel like the folks on our team, we have such a good relationship that, they know that they can come to me and say, hey, we got to switch this up. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, right? Everyone I've hired, I want them to challenge me. I want them to challenge. I don't want somebody who's just going to say, oh, yes, yeah, let's do that. That's a great idea. Yes, that's a great idea. You want someone who's going to challenge you a little bit. So you want to open up that door so they feel like they can provide that feedback as well.
Yeah, that's good. How are you getting feedback from home?
At home, my wife and I, we talk a little bit. At night, we kind of have our little routine. It feels like we are, we watch we always watch the same TV show. So I could be into one thing, she could be another thing, but we try to spend, the end of our evening together watching the same show. But normally during that time, it's not so much as like we're locked in on the show. That's the time that we have together. We talk about, what we're doing. At the end of the year, typically we also try to talk a little bit about, okay, what do we want for the following year and things like that. So I can always tell when we're not having those conversations, because that's normally when the conflict can arrive.
Right.
But once again, just knowing that I'm open to feedback. And Kristen's great. She's great at saying, hey, we should think about this or that, or hey, it bothers me when you do this, or things like that. So you got to keep that dialogue open. For my daughters, I know that they're 10, and I probably am not the best with having those conversations with them just quite yet, but certainly I know. So I've got 10-year-old twins, and I try to carve out that individual time with them. I'm probably a little bit better with one than the other, because one's a little more active than the other. And, so on Saturdays when the weather's warm, we normally will walk down to Starbucks, get to walk down there and have great one-on-one conversations with Izzy. I'm trying to find that connection I have obviously that connection with my daughter, Gabby, but we're really trying to find like, okay, what's our common thing that we get into? And a lot of that's around UC. She's a diehard Bearcat fan like me. I've kind of brainwashed her a little bit. So she likes watching games with me. I mean, that's kind of our little connection thing. But I probably need to, they're getting to the age now or 10 where we're saying, hey, getting a little more feedback. But we definitely have those great one-on-one conversations to really know. And constantly what I'm always telling them all the time is, hey, you can tell me anything. I know you're getting 10. And I always joke around with them all the time. You asked Izzy, what do you and your dad talk about in your walks to Starbucks? And she'll probably tell you that he always just says like, that don't think that your dad's ever like, not cool enough that I can't tell him anything. Cause I'm always like, at some point you're going to think I'm not cool anymore, and you're not going to talk to me about all this. I don't want this to end. I want you to feel like you can tell me anything. And so we talk about that a lot. So
my cousin in Denver, he has they call it the safe couch. So he's got 2 boys, and the idea is, hey, anything you say on the couch, it's safe. If you want to talk about, his kids are in high school and one's actually now in college, but whatever it was along the way, bullying or drugs or girls or just whatever the topic was, what kind of what stays on this couch, what's said on this couch stays on this. And I've always thought of that. We don't have a safe couch in our house, but really just setting up that environment. Hey, you tell us some things, there won't be, consequences if you're upfront and honest.
Yeah.
And or at least the consequences will be definitely minimized versus if we find out about it later.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No, that's
absolutely
good. So yeah, one thing with the kids for sure, I've almost done the grading scale. Hey kids, on a scale of 0 to 10, where am I at? And then, what they throw out a number, and then what do I need to do to get closer to a 10? And Scott, most of the time, what I need to do is be less coachy, less churchy, and kind of less leadership-y. Instead, it's, hey, just talk. Let's just hang out. So you may fall into the same traps as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a good tip though. Where do I fall on a 0 to 10? Is an easy way to ask.
Yeah, it's worked well, and it's so funny. They usually say the whole "don't be coachy," but sometimes, like one time, my daughter zoomed in. I'll say, "Don't say anything deep before noon." So it was good. Yeah. You mentioned you and your wife doing some kind of annual planning. Is it structured? I mean, do you have a framework that you guys use for annual planning? Do you do a retreat? You go kind of a staycation? Is there anything that you guys are doing that is really helping you reflect as well as launching the new year well?
Yeah. So we actually got this tip from another family. They kind of go away, do the staycation. So last year was supposed to be our first year that we were going to, of course, do this, and that did not end up happening. Right.
Some spiritual warfare against you guys. That's the problem.
Exactly.
You're to blame for COVID because you were going to do something strong for your marriage, and so the devil came against it.
Exactly. So it's just more of a framework of, okay, what do we want to do in this year? What do we want to accomplish? What do we want to give to, like for us, we were very intentional about a big goal that we had for this year. So our one of our daughters has some special needs, and she could be on a device all day long if you don't patrol it, right? So we have one daughter who should be on an iPad for an hour, and she's like, I want to go play. I want to go do something. And, our other daughter she gets locked into kind of screen time and everything. So last year we went to our friend's lake house quite a bit in the summer, and our daughter, Gabby, who's got some special needs, she loved being out on the water. She loved being outside. Cool. She just that was her like her thing. And we were kind of disconnected, unplugged. And so that was a goal of ours was, okay, we've identified this place. Our friends have a place out there. It's awesome. And we'd like to kind of replicate that to escape and be able to, for Gabby to enjoy being out on the water, unplugged, not like forcing her, like at home, it's like, get off, you got to go outside. It's like, when we get out there, she loves being out on the water. So that's a big goal that we've been working through. And we actually just recently closed on a place, so we're getting it ready to go, hopefully by Memorial Day. So that was a huge goal of ours that we talked about. And obviously talked to our financial planner. We did all this stuff to make sure it was a smart move. But we also knew deep down it was like something that we wanted to do for our family. And if I'm being honest, Corey, I mean, my first 5 years of building my business, I was not around a whole lot. It was just really building the business. The first few years as a real estate, you're just kind of on call, and it's 7 days a week and all that stuff. And now we've built the team out now where I can have weekends, with the family, which people think, well, you're a real estate agent, how can you have weekends? But we've built the structure with our team in a way that now most weekends I can enjoy with the family. I can be away. The lake we're at, it's an hour away. So if I did have to run back, it's not that big of a deal. That was another thing that we wanted to make sure that, hey, it was close enough where we would utilize it.
You've heard me talk about the 5 capitals before, but just remind even listeners, but the 5 capitals of the, first one being spiritual capital, second one relational, then third physical, then intellectual, and then financial. What I liked about how you talked about that whole real estate, buying it, like not once did I hear you say investment or great opportunity, but you were doing it all for kind of that purpose and family and relational piece, and really even identifying that the catalyst was your daughter with special needs, and then let's find a way to spend time. So that's just so neat to actually leverage that lower capital financial to buy it for the higher capitals. And as opposed to maybe a time in your life, or I know a time in my life, I may have been doing things just to make money.
Right.
And
this is definitely not a make money, because there was barely any inventory down in the lake. So all these lake houses, because of COVID, have gone like crazy, the prices. So that was actually the hardest part I had was like, oh man, I feel like I'm being in real estate. I'm kind of like, I don't know if this is the best real estate investment, but it was an investment in family.
Oh man, that's so strong. That's very good. Well, I was looking very forward to our conversation for a variety of reasons, because some things that I battle with, I know other leaders battle with. I know you're right in the thick of it. And so you kind of hit on, some of them, but one is that work-life balance from the standpoint of when I think of a realtor, I think of have to be on the clock almost all the time. Because after hours, most of when people want to go look at houses, for sure the weekends. You mentioned maybe that was kind of a kryptonite of growing your business earlier and far as that goes. So now you've got a team to balance it. So the first question is, what would be kind of your advice or recommendation to that realtor who's just starting out, who's hungry like you were, but yet don't fall in the same traps maybe that you did of maybe working all the time?
Yeah. And that's the thing that we see, right? If you grow your business, if you're successful in real estate, there's a lot of different real estate agents out there. There's 6,000 alone in greater Cincinnati. And if you are growing your business to a point, there's two things that happen, right? You're only one person. So you either have to serve your clients, and when's the time for your family? Mm-hmm. And then you get to a point where you're not even delivering good service to your clients anymore too, because you're busy running around. So for me, once I got to a certain point, and I was very lucky, I had my father actually coached a lot of real estate teams and things like that. So when I got in to the business, I was just kind of hitting my stride, making some money. And my dad's like, you need to hire an operations, you need to hire an admin. And I'm like, I want to keep this money coming in my pocket. I don't want it going back out, And he's like, I've seen too many people get burnt out, marriages go bad, and you're not gonna be able to service your clients. So the first step, you hired that admin, and that admin now role has grown to who's now our director of operations and has helped us grow our business. But what ends up happening is you've got to realize that you can only be so many places at one time. And I think one of the biggest myths are like, I'm the magic person that everyone just only wants to work with me. And really it's not. What people want is just really good service. Mm-hmm. So when you can teach your team the way that you've built your business, the way that you do things, the way that the way that business should be done in your manner, then you can grow that. Because how we're set up now, and that's what I was talking about with like weekends and things like that. So the way we're set up, I specialize working with our sellers. Heather, she's on as a co-lister with me and runs kind of our operations. And then we have buyer specialists who only work with buyers. And if you're following today's market, if something goes on the market, you got to be there. You got to drop everything and go. So how can I give my sellers the best attention, right? Trying to sell their place and do different things, if all of a sudden I got to drop everything and go once a house comes up. So that's where our buyers agents are very focused, trying to find our buyers' homes off market, and then they've got to be ready to go and get out there. And that's also what's great about the team approach is if one person can't make it, that a house comes up, then another person, we have multiple licensed folks on our team. And so we all just kind of work together, to make sure that we're servicing our clients well, but we're also having some balance. Now, I'd be also lying to you if I said springtime just isn't crazy. It is. It's right. All hands on deck, and it's one of the things that my family, my wife know, hey, there's a stretch where it gets a little bit crazy, but everybody kind of knows that a little bit. But once again, you have to deliver results to clients, but you also have to be engaged at home, right? And so you can't be everywhere at one time. So one of the best things that happened to me too was my dad worked through with me. We were growing our business. I was making more money than I ever imagined I would in the profession I was in. And I was debating on hiring one more position. And this was more of a support role that was a salary position. And it was a good chunk. And this guy was a great talent, but in order to get him to come over, I had to make sure he was going to be making more money than where he was before. Mm-hmm. And I went to my dad and I just said, I just don't know that, I just don't know that I want to write that check, be responsible for that check. And basically he said, well, what's this going to bring? I'm like, well, it will help me free up my weekends a little bit, because the position was specifically hired for a developer client that we work with, and they needed things open every weekend all the time. So you needed to make sure you got someone really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then also he was going to fill this other position. And what ended up happening is I got caught up in the dollar and cents of it. I ended up making the hire, and it was a great hire because A, it helped me once again. That was like one of the things that was tying me to weekends. And then B, what ended up happening was we were more profitable that year anyways, and even if we weren't, the time that I was able to get back with family, because once again, my first few years in the business, I was not probably around as much as I would have liked to, or my wife probably wanted me to.
Right.
And so those were some of the things that the decisions we made. And if you can delegate and train people to deliver and have your vision on the way that you want things done, then you can really grow. And that's how we've been able to grow. There's no one on our team who's more important than the other person. I always say it's not my team, it's our team. We all work together.
Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I hope you are enjoying it so far. Before we go back to the rest of this episode, I want to share with you my book, Win at Home First. Some of you have read it, so thank you very much. For others of you, you have not. And I encourage, if you're looking for a resource to help you with these times of your work is now in your home and your home is now in your work, and what this looks like, this book is being helpful to many leaders like you. Forbes magazine said it was one of 7 books everyone on your team should read. And the book is broken up into 4 different sections to help you. First is about you, understand who you are. The second is marriage and ideas and tips to help with your marriage. Third is parenting. And then last is work. So these 4 different sections to help you recalibrate during this time and to help move forward. So if you are needing additional resources, I encourage you to check out my book, Win at Home First. It is available on Amazon as well as Audible. And so on to the rest of the episode. Thank you very much. So Scott, on an ambition standpoint, you've grown double digits, your signs are everywhere. How do you balance the basically ambition of, I want to be the biggest and best in the city? And because you still, even though you've got a team around you, you could go still work 24/7.
Yeah. And I battle with that, and because I'm competitive too. That's the other thing.
Right.
Sometimes it's not so much financial too, is like the competitive side of you as well, which, healthy competition can be good. But it can also be bad in some ways too. And, so yeah, I do have to balance that a little bit. And those are, once again, there's conversations with my wife who, sometimes will say, gosh, aren't you're doing all this and that, things are great. Do we got to do this? And do you have to do that? And Chase, and there have been times where it's like so hard for me to say, where I have turned down business if someone's like, hey, I need you to come here. I need you to meet, this time, and I can only do this time. And I know there was a time before where I would say, no, I've got something on, there's a time before I would say, yeah. And I'd go to my wife and say, I'm sorry, I know we got a commitment, but I got to chase this piece of business. Right. We got to cancel this, and I'm going to go and I'm going to do it. And I've gotten a little bit better at, okay, if it's locked in, if I already have something locked into the calendar, that time is spaced off. You're not just going to drop something in order to chase that piece of business. Is that one extra, house worth missing your kid's game for, or something like that? And you know what, if they can't understand that you can't do that, then, do you want to work with that person? Right. That's the other thing. Right. So, and most people are great. You say, hey, look, I've got my kid's game this time, blah, blah, blah. Hey, no problem. When can we can work another time? But the folks sometimes are like, nope, this is the only time. Sorry. If you can't make it, we'll move on to someone else. I say, all right, then maybe you need to talk to someone else. But those are hard. Still hard for me to do. It's like, No,
it's hard. I mean, you are like me. We're not only are we at high ambition achievement, but it's also approval of others. We want to, we don't like saying no. I've had a lot of people over the years say, man, how do you make it to all your kids' activities? Or how do you do all that? And and I think one of the first steps that helped me do that is I put it in the calendar right away. Like when I get the kids' schedule, it goes into the calendar. When I dance recitals, gymnastics meets, whatever those things are, I put them in right away so that I know where when I've helped leaders do that or say, hey, man, get that schedule in there quick, then they can make those decisions. But a lot of times we say yes to the work stuff because that's the stuff we know of first. And then we take the time or we learn of the weekend's game on that Friday when it's like, hey, what are we doing this weekend?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're a lot like me where it's, hey, I put that stuff in my calendar first and then I work around it.
Yep. And that's the thing. I mean, that's what we try to do. And the best thing we did too was, so we run on G Suite. Mm-hmm. And then, so my wife and I, we set up a separate Google account. And so we have our family calendar in a different color. So everyone in my office can also see my kind of family stuff there. So if anyone's scheduling appointments, they know to check with me first before locking anything in, because they know they'll hear from not just me, but from her too.
Yeah, no, that's good. Another thing I was wanting to talk to you about is this idea of, basically a scarcity mindset, where you already mentioned there's 6,000 realtors in the city and there aren't a ton of houses popping up. And how do you keep your head positive? How do you lead your team positively without the scarcity mindset of, hey, it's over. We may not get another house this year, or there aren't going to be enough, but yet you continue to lead optimistically and go forward. So how do you stay positive and have that abundant mindset?
Yeah, I've always been kind of a half glass full guy. And I tell you, Joe King, president of our company, he says something all the time. He's like, you know what, if you just focus on the activities, the results will come, right? So, and I just kind of repeat that to my folks. Hey, we can only control what we can control. We can make excuses and say, well, the inventory is really low, or, COVID last year, all these different things. We can't control some things, but what we can control is our mindset. We can control our attitudes. We can still control those activities that we do. So you say, oh, well, there's low inventory, I guess we just give up. Well, no, right? Then nothing's going to happen. The thing in our business, and it's like most businesses, if you think about it, especially anyone in sales, is you're planting seeds, right? And you're just watering those seeds. And you don't know when those are gonna blossom, right? And if you're not doing the activities, which is watering those seeds, then that business will not be there eventually. And it may not be right away. It may not be next month. It may not be 6 months, maybe 12 months. There's things and activities that we do that generate things 3 years down the road, 2 years down the road, right? And so you have to focus on the activities. Yeah, we're big on results. And I've recently got into, we have a big analytics dashboard now that tracks a lot of the KPIs of, okay, appointments set, appointments met. And we can see, okay, how does that compare to 2019? How does that compare to 2020, years before? So we've got an idea of like leading indicators, lagging indicators, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I try to tell people, focus on the activities, the results will come. And I mean, COVID last year was a perfect example. The market just totally paused, right? Mm-hmm. No one knew what was going on. We had sellers who wanted to take their homes off the market, which was understandably so, right? It was like no one knew what was going on. No one wanted anyone in their house. We had buyers who were afraid, that they were getting ready to close on homes. Does it make sense to, still move forward, all that stuff. So we're having a lot of these conversations, and next thing you know, there's like nothing in the pipeline or anything. So like it just shut down. I just said, guys, I gave this kind of put together this PowerPoint deck and, hey, here's what we're going to do. And, just stay positive. Here's what we can focus on. And they're like, oh, we don't want to hear your positivity. Like, things are just shutting down. But slowly and surely, we were just doing the activities. And then sure enough, who would have ever predicted? I mean, the housing market just absolutely exploded. And had we had just said, you know what, there's nothing we could do. We're not going to stay in front of everyone. We wouldn't have had those opportunities once things kind of cranked back up again, because we were staying in front of people by doing a lot of different things, social media wise, and having contests and, delivering parent survival kits during COVID, stuff like that, just to stay in front of people. And, and so you just have to focus on those activities. And when things turn around, they will. So
that's good. I have a morning routine, and basically it's to help my mindset, help elevate my mindset. And it sounds like, you can stay positive, but I know for sure you got your down days. And,
absolutely.
And when the lead indicators aren't looking very good, what are you doing to elevate your mindset?
For me, I've got some folks that I follow, and then, just asking for God's help to, keep you positive, and to not focus on the negative, because that's easy to do. It's so easy to do, right? To fall in that trap.
Right. So Scott, part of my story is, where I had to, speaking of, prayer and God, where just, hey, you need to hand over your story for a greater story. And, knowing a little bit about just, you started out commercial real estate, then you made the transition into, residential and launch your own company. And we've talked about how it went from one to now you've got a team. But during any of that, was there a moment where you felt God just saying, hey, you got to hand over your small story for a greater story?
Yeah. So, I've started commercial real estate, and was selling apartment communities, and the second half of '08 hit, and the market just absolutely crashed. People thought the residential market got hit hard. The commercial market got hit even harder. I was selling them these apartment communities, nothing could get financed. And I went 13 months without a paycheck. So 100% commission business. And I was just a junior broker on the time. I had a partner, a great mentor, a guy by the name of Dave Locker. He was a great mentor to me. And, 13 months with no paycheck. And, I told Dave, I said, I don't think I can survive through this. I don't know that I can weather the storm. And at the same time, my wife and I, we were trying to have kids. We found out that, we would have to do IVF. We did that. We had 7 failed IVF attempts. So we were just kind of hemorrhaging money.
Wow.
And, I decided to make a change career-wise. I actually accepted an offer to do something that I wasn't excited about, but it would have been just a salary, not straight commission. And came to my wife and said, hey, I'm going to take this position. She's like, you seem like not real excited about it. I'm like, because I'm not passionate about it. I'm not excited about it, but I know we need to get some money coming in the door. And she's like, well, what would you want to do? I'm like, well, I love real estate. And so I'm actually a 3rd generation in residential real estate. And one of the things why I went to commercial, it was all ego. It was like, that's what my grandfather did. It's what my dad did. I want to blaze my own trail and something different, but I loved real estate. Right. And she's like, well, I think you would be great at it. And I'm like, well, that market kind of stinks too right now. I mean, that was when that housing meltdown was going on too, but decided to do it. We liquidated any investments we had, 401k, and that was my startup seed money. And basically we were like, all right, 6 months to try to make this work.
Yeah.
All around in the background while this is all going on, I made this change 6 weeks before we found out that we were going to have kids. So we were we had the multiple failed IVF attempts. We said we were going to take some time off, maybe look into adoption or something else down the road in like a year or two. But the nurse who always gave us the bad news that our IVFs didn't work calls Kristen, my wife, and says, hey, I feel called to carry for you guys. And she's like, what?
Wow.
What are you talking about? So we go to dinner with her and her husband, and she tells us, hey, I've always wanted to do this for a family, and I just feel like you guys are the right family. And we're like, holy cow. And, meanwhile, we'd been going through Crossroads, had a fertility support group that was going on during the whole time to kind of help us through our journey. And it was interesting because, I had always grown up. I went to church growing up and went to college, stopped going to church. We picked our church we got married in because it was pretty,
Yeah, right.
And it was really actually when we started kind of going through our fertility journey that connected us to Crossroads and how we kind of got to Crossroads. And that fertility support group is just a great group of folks that kind of helped us get through that journey. And so when Carmen had offered to carry for us, we're like, holy cow, we were like, I don't know how we're gonna make this work, because even though she's volunteering to do that, there's still some compensation involved. There's a lot of legal fees. There's a lot of stuff going on, and we just tapped out. And our parents had helped out and everything. And there was a couple in that fertility support group that the money that they tithe to the church, they would rehab houses, and the profits they would go and they would do that. Well, anyways, she had a meeting with my wife and handed her a check for a decent amount of money, knowing our story. And we had to learn to accept, which was very, very difficult. But if we wouldn't have had our kids today, because that's what kind of bridged the gap in order for us to go through with the whole surrogacy thing. And that's how we have our kids today. And like during that whole process, right, of starting a career, trying to have kids, I mean, I met with Chuck Mingo at Crossroads going, here's what's going on, man. I'm like, I can only see darkness. I don't see a light at the end of this tunnel. I don't know what is going on, you know? And he kind of walked me through everything. And man, I tell you what, and that's where right then and there, when I talked to him, I was like, you know what? Just gonna leave this in God's hands. You want to try to control everything. You want everything on your time when you want it to happen, all these different things. You fast forward now, and it's like the career thing. I never even really liked doing when I was doing commercial real estate. Now it's like, I love what I'm doing. Love the career, right? Had the economy not made that shift, I probably would have never made the transition or the change. You know, our twins, they're 10 now. So Carmen, who was our carrier, her daughters are like, they call our daughters our fairy god sisters. I mean, our families talk all the time, and it's a super close relationship and bond that wouldn't be there, right, without all this. And so the story isn't exactly how you put it together in your mind, right? Like if you were to say, hey, this is going to be your journey to having kids, I would have never mapped it out that way, but now I wouldn't change it for the world, you know? And it was our fertility journey actually that drew us closer to Christ, you know? And it was that support group that helped us and really pulled us in, and you know, just loved on us. And so like I said, sometimes you're going through things, you're like, why is this happening? I don't get it. I don't understand. But it wasn't until you say, okay, I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna put it in God's hands, and instead of try to control it and do it exactly how we think it should be in a pink bow, you know?
Yeah.
So
fascinating story, Scott. Thanks for sharing that. And so in light of that story, in light of you kind of handing over, what's it look like now going forward? I mean, do you find yourself just more kind of open-handed to what God has and almost less controlling?
Yes, I have been. I wouldn't say I'm still, you know, perfect at it by any means, you know, but I try to, and I feel like that's helped me in more of this positive nature, right? Of like when we were going through like COVID last year and things like that. It's like, you know what, you know, there's nothing, you know, we just got to put it in God's hands. There's nothing that I can do that's going to change any of this stuff. Right. You know, and just trust. And that's what you have to do. And so, yeah, I've still need to be better at it. I still like to control certain things. And I sense when I'm getting into that a little bit too. And that's what's good. That's what's good about, you know, we've got a Friday morning men's group, guys at Crossroads that meet. We've still been able to meet, you know, whether it be virtual or when the weather starts getting nice. We've got a little gas fire pit. We hang around at 6 a.m. in the morning, some coffee, and they're good at just kind of talking about life and what's going on, and then kind of not calling you out, but holding you accountable a little bit. Like, hey, you need to maybe release a little bit. Sometimes it's a good gut check, when you think you're doing good, and then you're like, I'm falling back into the control mode a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I was just talking to someone today, a client where, there's a season where I was that lone wolf, and now, got a strong community of guys as well. And we need it. When I was writing my book, Went Home First, came across this quote that I still talk about is, no one ever talks about Jesus's greatest miracle. And it's the fact that he had 3 close friends in his early 30s. Because a lot of us don't, because not that I'm in my early 30s anymore, but actually it was probably in the early 30s where I didn't have the close friends because it's all about work. And then on the weekends, you try to be super husband, super dad, and it gets all lost. So, man,
absolutely.
You and I have a few things in common. One of which I didn't realize in 2008, you about, lost your shirt as well from the real estate. And part of my story is, I had 5 houses as a side kind of hustle I lost, or my wife and I did. So almost had to file bankruptcy, but thanks to God's provision, I was able to navigate out of it. But man, I still have some wounds from that I had to overcome.
Absolutely.
What's the best way, Scott, for people to get a hold of you, whether it's to sell a house or just to learn from some of the great things you shared today, whether it's on family or on business?
Sure. You can always shoot me an email, scott@oylergroup.com. That's OYLER group.com. Or you can always reach out 513-979-1925.
Great. Scott, thank you very much for talking today to the Went Home First audience.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Corey.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast, Win at Home First. I am so grateful to hear from listeners like you that this content has been helpful. So now I would love for you to pay it forward. I want to get this message in the hands of more listeners. We need leaders to be winning both at home and at work, especially during this time. So please take a minute to share this episode with somebody you think would find value in it, as well as rate and subscribe. As a thank you, please visit my website at corymcarlson.com to download a free resource that people are finding value in. Thank you very much.
This is the podcastfactory.com.